Can you truly know the weight of a crown, the chilling touch of loneliness that settles upon a child who has known no mother's embrace, no father's guiding hand? Imagine just for a moment the world through the eyes of an infant, a mere month old, yet already adrift on a sea of political upheaval. This is where our journey begins, with a baby named Catherine, born into the turbulent heart of the 16th century, a time of shifting alliances and whispered betrayals. Her cries, tiny and unheard, were swallowed by the grand, indifferent silence of a world that cared little for a newborn without protectors. Her parents, gone too soon, had left her an inheritance not of comfort, but of precariousness. Picture her, if you can, a porcelain doll passed from hand to hand, from the austere solitude of one convent to the uncertain refuge of a distant relative, always just one step ahead of the shadows that pursued her family. The very air around her seemed to hum with danger, a subtle tremor that would forever shape the core of her being. She learned early, in the quietude of cloistered walls and the hurried whispers of her caretakers, that safety was a fleeting illusion, a gossamer thread easily snapped. Her childhood, unlike those bathed in the warmth of familial love, was a mosaic of transient dwellings, each one a temporary harbor against the storm. She witnessed, with the innocent yet keenly observant eyes of a child, the ebb and flow of power, the fickle nature of loyalty. The stone walls of the convents offered a peculiar kind of sanctuary, a muted world where time seemed to stretch and thin. Each day, a long, hushed breath. She would watch the patterns of sunlight on the ancient floors, listen to the distant chanting of the nuns, and in those quiet moments, perhaps, a seed of resilience was planted within her, a resilience that would one day bloom into a formidable will, a will capable of navigating the treacherous currents of a royal court. The world outside, a vibrant tapestry of Renaissance Italy, was a distant hum, a whispered legend beyond the heavy wooden doors. Yet, even in this sheltered existence, the tremors of that world found their way in, a subtle vibration underfoot, a reminder that even within sanctity, the outside world exerted its relentless pull. She carried within her the unspoken questions of an orphan, the yearning for belonging, and the fierce, silent determination to survive. This unspoken resolve, born from a childhood defined by instability, would become her invisible armor, forged in the crucible of solitude and uncertainty. Imagine the soft scratch of the quill on parchment, the gentle turning of pages, as knowledge became her quiet companion, her only solace in a world that offered so little. She observed, she absorbed, she learned, not just from books, but from the hushed conversations, the fleeting expressions, the unspoken anxieties that permeated her temporary homes. This silent accumulation of understanding, this quiet forging of an inner world, would be her truest inheritance, far more valuable than any lost fortune. The echoes of her family's grand past, the Medici, a name synonymous with power and patronage, were mere whispers in the wind to her, then a lullaby of lost glory. Yet that name, that legacy, was intrinsically woven into her very being, waiting for the moment to awaken. Can you feel the gentle pull of history, drawing you deeper into this quiet, unfolding narrative? Do you sense the profound solitude that shaped her earliest days, a solitude that would linger even amidst the clamor of court? Picture her small hand tracing the cold stone of a convent wall, seeking comfort in its unyielding presence. Each new face, each new whispered instruction, was another lesson in adaptation, another thread woven into the intricate tapestry of her nascent personality. She learned to read the subtle shifts in expressions, to discern unspoken intentions, skills that would prove invaluable in the labyrinthine world of royal politics. The scent of old books, the murmur of prayers, the faint scent of beeswax and ancient dust. These were the textures of her early life, shaping a quiet, observant mind. She was a silent witness to her own precarious existence, a little bird, perpetually on the verge of flight, yet finding fleeting moments of peace in the quiet rhythms of convent life. Her days were a gentle ebb and flow of lessons, contemplation, and the ever-present awareness of her unique, isolated position. There was no boisterous laughter echoing through her childhood, no carefree games under the sun. Instead, there was a profound stillness, a watchful quietude that taught her to listen not just with her ears, but with every fiber of her being. This deep listening, this acute observation, would become her greatest strength, allowing her to perceive the currents beneath the surface, the true motivations hidden beneath polite smiles. And then, a shift, a tremor in her quiet world, the whisper of a name that would change everything. Giulio de Medici, her uncle, had ascended to the highest office, becoming Pope Clement VII. Can you feel the subtle change in the air, the lifting of a heavy veil? Suddenly, the orphan child was no longer a burden, no longer a pawn to be shuffled, but a valuable asset, a niece of the most powerful man in the Catholic world. Imagine the stark contrast, from the humble, quiet confines of a convent to the fog, opulent, echoing grandeur of a Florentine palace. The very air must have felt different, thick with the scent of incense and ambition, alive with the hushed rustle of expensive fabrics and the soft, clinking sound of jewels. For the first time, Catherine was not merely tolerated, but celebrated, bathed in the reflected glory of her powerful uncle. The simplicity of her convent life was replaced by a dizzying array of silks, jewels, and sumptuous meals. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, did she feel the subtle chill of obligation, the understanding that this newfound splendor was tied inextricably to her uncle's power? The sudden shift in her circumstances must have been both exhilarating and disorienting. From being an afterthought, she became a focal point, the object of attention, a symbol of the Medici's resurgence. Imagine the vibrant colors, the rich tapestries, the intricate artwork that now surrounded her, a feast for eyes accustomed to austere simplicity. This was a world of diplomats and artists, scholars and schemers, a crucible of intellectual and political fervor. She was no longer just Catherine, the orphan. She was Catherine de Medici, the Pope's niece, a name that commanded respect and perhaps a touch of fear. This new reality, however, brought with it a different kind of confinement. The gilded cage, though beautiful, was still a cage. She was a pawn, albeit a valuable one, in the grand game of European politics. Her education, once a quiet, self-directed pursuit, now became a formal affair, designed to prepare her for a role she did not yet fully comprehend. She would have been taught Latin, Greek, rhetoric, the intricacies of courtly etiquette, and the delicate dance of diplomacy. Her mind, already sharpened by solitude, would have absorbed these lessons with a quiet intensity. Do you hear the distant strains of Renaissance music, the soft murmur of learned conversation, filling the air of her new grand abode? The whispers in the palace corridors would have been different too, no longer about her survival, but about her future, about potential alliances, about the power she represented. She was no longer hiding. She was being showcased, a symbol of her family's renewed might. This period of her life was a delicate balance between lavish indulgence and rigorous discipline. She was learning to navigate the treacherous waters of power, observing her uncle, the Pope, as he wielded influence and shaped destinies. The lessons she absorbed during this time, though unspoken, were perhaps the most profound. The art of negotiation, the importance of appearance, and the absolute necessity of vigilance. She was learning to play the game, even if she was, for now, only an observer from the sidelines. But remember, in this era, fortunes could turn with the speed of a shifting wind. The year 1527 arrived, and with it, a cataclysm that would once again plunge Catherine into uncertainty. The power of the Medici in Florence, seemingly unshakable, crumbled. Can you feel the sudden drop, the lurch in your stomach, as the grand palace that had become her home was engulfed by chaos? The once revered name of Medici became a target of scorn, and Catherine, once again, found herself a prisoner, a hostage in the very city that had celebrated her. This was not the gentle confinement of a convent, but a harsh, terrifying reality. She was shuffled between a series of convents, each one less a sanctuary and more a holding cell, where her life hung precariously in the balance. The whispers around her now were of threats, of vengeance, of the very real possibility of harm. The grand, echoing halls of the palace were replaced by stark, cold stone walls. The silks and jewels were gone, replaced by simple, coarse garments. This was a brutal reminder of the fragility of power, the swiftness with which status could evaporate. She had tasted luxury, only to have it cruelly snatched away, leaving behind the bitter aftertaste of insecurity. Imagine her fear, the cold grip of anxiety in her young heart as she faced an uncertain fate. Yet even in this renewed adversity, the resilience she had cultivated in her earliest years would have served her. She had learned to adapt, to survive, to endure. Each new prison, each new threat, only hardened her resolve, deepening the lines of determination that would one day define her face. She was not broken by these trials. Instead, she was forged, tempered in the fires of adversity. The lessons of observation, of patience, of quiet strength were reinforced. She learned to wait, to listen, to trust her own instincts in a world where trust was a dangerous luxury. This period, though dark, was crucial in shaping the woman she would become. A woman who understood the capriciousness of fortune, the fleeting nature of alliances, and the ultimate necessity of relying on one's own inner fortitude. The sounds around her would have been different too. The clanging of gates, the heavy footsteps of guards, the whispered threats of her captors. But within her, a silent resolve began to take root, a determination to transcend her circumstances, to reclaim a life that had been so cruelly dictated by others. Can you feel the quiet hum of her unbreakable spirit, even in the face of such overwhelming odds? Asterisk, do you remember the chill of those stone walls, the heavy silence of her imprisonment in Florence? The sense of being adrift, a small boat caught in the raging currents of political tempest? Hold that feeling, just for a moment, as we sense the subtle shift in the winds of fortune. For even in the depths of her despair, a glimmer of light, faint yet persistent, began to penetrate the darkness. Her uncle, Pope Clement VII, though himself diminished by the sack of Rome and the turmoil that had cost the Medici their Florentine dominion, was a man of immense will and an even greater ambition. As the dust slowly settled, as alliances were, cautiously reforged and shattered pieces of power painstakingly reassembled, his thoughts, as if drawn by an invisible thread, turned once more to his orphaned niece. He remembered her, not just as a vulnerable child, but as a potential asset, a living symbol of Medici lineage, a piece in the grand chess game of European diplomacy that he was determined to continue playing. Imagine the quiet, almost hesitant knock on the heavy door of her latest temporary refuge. The soft creak of hinges as a ray of sunlight, or perhaps just the filtered light of a single candle, illuminates a figure of authority, come not to threaten, but to reclaim. Can you feel the slow release of tension in your own shoulders, mirroring the subtle unclenching of Catherine's small, perpetually guarded heart? She was no longer a pawn to be held captive, but a piece to be moved carefully, strategically, onto a different part of the board. The air around her began to hum with a different kind of energy, not the frantic buzz of fear, but the low thrum of anticipation. She was brought out of the shadows gently, reverently, almost as if she were a delicate, precious artifact that had been misplaced and was now found. And so, she was returned to the embrace of papal favor, transported from the austerity of her confinement to the grand, vibrant heart of papal Rome. Can you envision the sensory explosion it must have greeted her? The muted colors of her previous existence replaced by the dazzling hues of Renaissance art, the scent of incense heavy in the air, mingling with the aroma of rich foods and exotic spices. The hushed whispers of convents were drowned out by the chi. Vibrant clamor of a city alive with intellectual discourse, artistic genius, and political machinations. Here, under the direct patronage of her uncle, she was no longer merely surviving. She was flourishing, blossoming under a golden, albeit conditional sun. Her education continued, but with an intensity and breadth previously unimaginable. She studied Latin and Greek, the ancient languages whispering their secrets to her. She delved into rhetoric, the art of persuasive speech, learning to choose her words with precision, to understand the subtle power they held. She learned the intricate dance of courtly etiquette, the nuanced bows, the carefully timed courtesies, the unspoken rules that governed every interaction in the highest echelons. Of power dot, she was taught by the finest minds of the age, her quick, observant intellect absorbing every lesson. Think of the quiet rustle of parchment as she turned the pages of illuminated manuscripts, the soft scratch of a quill as she practiced her elegant script. She listened intently to the conversations around her, the hushed discussions of alliances, forged and broken, of kingdoms rising and falling. She observed her uncle, the Pope, a master of political maneuvering, as he deftly navigated the treacherous waters of European power. She saw how he used diplomacy, how he wielded religious authority, how he understood the delicate balance of fear and respect. These were lessons far beyond textbooks, lessons etched into her very being by the daily spectacle of papal authority. She was a sponge, soaking up every detail, every nuance, every whispered secret. Even amidst the lavish banquets and the glittering ceremonies, she maintained a quiet vigilance, an inner stillness that allowed her to see beyond the surface, to understand the true currents flowing beneath the gilded facade. Do you hear the distant chime of the bells of Rome, the murmur of the crowds, the quiet footsteps of scholars and artists in the vast echoing halls? This was her world now, a world of grandeur and intricate plotting, where her very existence was intertwined with the destiny of the church and the aspirations of her family. Then came the grand design, the ultimate play in the Pope's political game. The whispers began, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves on a distant breeze, then growing steadily louder, more insistent. A marriage, a strategic alliance that would bind the Medici, through Catherine, to one of the most powerful monarchies. In Europe, France, can you feel the shift in atmosphere, the subtle tension that enters the air as her future is decided, not by her own desires, but by the dictates of statecraft? The groom was to be Henry, the second son of King Francis, the first of Vaux. France, not the heir apparent, but a valuable prince nonetheless, a younger brother who could one day, perhaps, ascend to the throne. The negotiations were long, complex, a delicate ballet of power and prestige. The dowry was immense, a staggering sum that underscored Catherine's value as a political asset, a tangible representation of the Medici's wealth and influence. Imagine the hushed excitement, the frantic preparations, tailors working through the night, silks and velvets shimmering in the candlelight, jewelers meticulously setting precious stones. This was to be a wedding of unprecedented luxury, a spectacle designed to showcase the power and artistry of Italy, a grand gesture of alliance between two great powers. For Catherine, it must have been a whirlwind of emotions. Anticipation, yes, for a new life, a new beginning, but perhaps also trepidation. She was leaving the familiar, albeit sometimes harsh, world of Italy for a distant land, a foreign court, whose customs and language were yet unknown to her. She was to become a bride, a wife, a potential mother, all at the tender age of 14. Can you feel the mix of youthful wonder and quiet apprehension in her heart? The journey to France itself was a grand procession, a spectacle that spanned across land and sea. Imagine the gentle rocking of the ship as it carried her across the azure waters, the vast expanse of the sky above, the boundless horizon stretching out before her. She would have glimpsed new landscapes, heard unfamiliar dialects, tasted different foods. Each day brought her closer to a destiny that had been meticulously planned for her. As her entourage approached the shores of France, imagine the burgeoning excitement, the faint murmur of anticipation among her new attendants. The air would have felt different, perhaps a little cooler, carrying the scent of a new land, a new future. And then, the meeting. The marriage ceremony itself, held in the vibrant city of Marseille, was a testament to unparalleled extravagance. Can you picture the scene? The glittering chandeliers, the rich tapestries adorning the walls, the scent of thousands of candles, and fresh flowers filling the air, the rustle of 1,000 silk gowns, the glint of jewels catching the light, the hushed murmur of the assembled dignitaries. She, a girl of 14, stood before a king and a prince, about to be bound by sacred vows to a powerful foreign house. Her husband, Henry, was a young man of her own age, handsome and athletic. Their eyes would have met, perhaps with curiosity, perhaps with a touch of shyness. The entire ceremony was a dazzling display of wealth and power, a declaration to the world of a new, formidable alliance. It was a day of pomp and ceremony, a day marking her transformation from a Medici ward to a French princess. Can you hear the solemnity of the vows, the joyous peal of the bells, the celebratory music filling the air? But beneath the surface of this glittering spectacle, the reality of her new life began to set in. The French court was a different beast altogether from the Florentine palaces she had known. It was more formal, perhaps more steeped in ancient traditions, a place where rivalries simmered just beneath the surface of polite smiles. She was an outsider, a foreigner, a Medici, and despite her powerful connections, there was a subtle undercurrent of suspicion, a quiet prejudice against her Italian origins. The most immediate challenge, however, was the profound loneliness of her new position. Her husband Henry, though kind, was soon captivated by another, an older, formidable woman named Diane de Poitiers. Can you feel the quiet ache of a young wife navigating a new world while her husband's affection drifts elsewhere? This was a silent, persistent challenge, a shadow that would follow her for decades. And then, the most pressing anxiety for a royal bride, the absence of children. Year after year, the royal cradle remained empty. The whispers at court would have grown louder, more cruel. Was she barren? Was the marriage cursed? The pressure must have been immense, a suffocating weight on her young shoulders. Imagine the quiet despair she must have felt, the fervent prayers for a child, the silent yearning for the fulfillment of her primary duty as a royal wife. For 10 long years, the hope for an heir remained unfulfilled, casting a long, dark shadow over her position, making her feel ever more precarious, a valuable pawn that had yet to deliver on its promise. This quiet struggle, this unspoken agony, became the defining characteristic of her early years in France, a testament to her enduring strength in the face of profound personal disappointment and public scrutiny. Do you sense the quiet resolve that deepened within her during these trying times? A resilience forged not in grand battles, but in the intimate, private spaces of her own heart? Asterisk, do you remember the hushed whispers, the unspoken anxieties that plagued Catherine during those first 10 years of her marriage? The empty cradle a stark symbol of her precarious position. Feel now the subtle lifting of that burden, the soft, hopeful stirrings of life within her. In 1544, a miracle unfolded, a quiet answer to countless prayers. A son, Francis, was born. Imagine the profound relief that must have washed over her. A wave of warmth dispelling the long-standing chill of uncertainty. The court, once quick to judge and whisper, now buzzed with a different kind of energy, one of joyous celebration, of sighs of relief. She had fulfilled her most crucial duty to the crown. She had provided an heir. This was not just the birth of a child. It was the rebirth of her status, the quiet cementing of her place within the French royal family. The years that followed were a testament to her newfound fertility. From 1544 to 1556, she bore 10 children to Henry, a remarkable feat that silenced all doubts about her ability to secure the Valois dynasty. Can you hear the joyful cries of infants echoing through the grand nurseries, the patter of little feet on polished floors? 7 of her children would survive the perils of childhood, a testament to her resilience and care, forging a deep maternal bond that would influence her decisions for the rest of her life. Imagine the soft touch of her hand on a tiny forehead, the gentle lullabies whispered in the quiet hours of the night. She was now a mother, a queen, a source of continuation for the French throne. And with each birth, her personal power, though not yet political, grew in quiet strength. Yet, even as the nurseries filled with the happy sounds of children, a shadow persisted, a quiet hum of unspoken pain that you can almost feel lingering in the ornate chambers. Do you remember Diane de Poitiers, the king's beloved mistress? Her presence remained a constant, undeniable reality, a beautiful, powerful woman who held Henry's heart and much of his ear. While Catherine bore the king's children, it was Diane who truly shared his bed, his confidence, and often his power. Imagine the subtle sting of seeing her husband's gaze linger on another, the quiet dignity with which Catherine endured this public slight. She rarely challenged Diane directly, choosing instead a path of patient endurance, a silent strength that belied the turmoil within. She focused on her children, on her own intellectual pursuits, building a quiet world around herself while observing the intricate dance of power that Diane so masterfully performed. There was a unique kind of pain in this arrangement, a constant reminder of her secondary emotional role, even as her primary dynastic duty was fulfilled. It was a lesson in silent suffering, in the art of enduring gracefully, skills that would serve her well in the turbulent years to come. Then, a sudden, brutal turn of fate, a moment that would shatter the fragile peace of her world and irrevocably alter the course of French history. The year was 1559. King Henry II, her husband, strong and vibrant, participated in a jousting tournament to celebrate 2 momentous royal weddings, one of his daughter, Elizabeth, and one of his sister, Margaret. Can you hear the thunder of hooves, the excited roar of the crowd, the clash of lances breaking against shields? It was a glorious spectacle, a demonstration of chivalry and strength. But then, a moment of profound, terrible mischance. A splinter from a shattered lance wielded by Gabriel, Comte de Montgomery, pierced the king's eye, penetrating his brain. Imagine the sudden, horrifying silence that would have fallen over the jousting grounds. The collective gasp of 1,000 onlookers. Feel the shock, the cold dread that must have gripped Catherine's heart as she witnessed this unimaginable tragedy. Her husband, her king, the father of her children, struck down in an instant in the midst of celebration. For 10 agonizing days, Henry lingered, his life slowly ebbing away. The court plunged into a state of terrified limbo. Catherine, though long sidelined by Diane, was now at his bedside, a grieving wife, bearing witness to the slow, agonizing end of their shared life. Can you hear the labored breaths, the hushed whispers of physicians, the palpable fear that permeated the royal chambers? His death, when it finally came, was not just a personal tragedy for her. It was a political earthquake. With Henry's passing, Catherine was transformed. The neglected wife, the queen consort in the shadows, suddenly stepped into the stark, unforgiving light of power. Her eldest son, Francis II, a mere 15 years old, ascended to the throne. He was young, sickly, and utterly unprepared for the immense responsibilities of kingship. Can you feel the weight of destiny settling upon Catherine's shoulders? The sudden, terrifying realization that the future of France and her children now rested precariously in her hands. In her profound grief, she adopted black as her lifelong mourning color, a stark, dramatic statement that both honored her dead husband and served as a powerful visual symbol of her new solemn role. She was no longer simply Queen Catherine. She was the Queen Mother, the keeper of the dynasty. However, the path to power was far from clear. Francis II, her young king, was heavily influenced by his beautiful and ambitious wife, Mary, Queen of Scots, and even more so by her powerful uncles, the Guise family. They were formidable, ruthless, and deeply entrenched in the highest echelons of French power. They quickly asserted their control over the young king, effectively dominating the new reign. Imagine Catherine, a newly widowed mother, her heart still heavy with grief, watching as her young son, her hope for the future, was drawn into the formidable orbit of these powerful rivals. She was deeply suspicious of the Guise, sensing their raw ambition and their unwavering desire to control the kingdom. This was a new battle, fought not on the jousting field, but in the hushed, gilded corridors of the Louvre, a silent struggle for the mind and loyalty of her impressionable son. She was the Queen Mother, but her authority was not yet established. The Guise, with their vast networks and their military might, seemed insurmountable. Can you feel the tension in the air, the subtle but relentless pressure she exerted, seeking any crack in their formidable armor, any opportunity to assert her rightful influence over her own son and the kingdom he now ruled? She watched, she waited, she learned, her quiet observation turning into strategic calculation. The years of quiet suffering, of patient endurance under Diane de Poitiers, had prepared her for this moment, steeling her resolve and sharpening her political instincts. She would not let the Guise usurp her family's power, nor would she stand idly by as her son became their puppet. The game, a much more dangerous one now, had truly begun. Do you remember the formidable shadow cast by the Guise family, their iron grip on the young King Francis II, and Catherine's quiet determination to reclaim her rightful influence? Feel now the subtle shift in the air, the strategic movements. of a mind honed by years of observation and silent endurance. Catherine understood that direct confrontation with the powerful guys at this moment would be folly. Their military strength, their vast network of alliances, and their immediate access to the king made them seemingly invincible. So she chose a different path, a path of quiet infiltration, of strategic patience. She began to weave her own intricate web, a counter-network of information and influence. Imagine the hushed conversations in dimly lit corridors, the soft rustle of letters exchanged in secret, the carefully chosen words whispered into trusted ears. She cultivated her own sources, gathering intelligence from every corner of the court. There are whispers, even now, of a legendary flying squadron, a group of beautiful, intelligent women whom Catherine allegedly deployed to charm and glean secrets from various courtiers and ambassadors. Can you picture these elegant figures, their laughter light and captivating, their eyes sharp and perceptive, as they moved through the glittering salons, gathering vital information for their silent mistress? This was her method, not brute force, but subtle persuasion, psychological warfare, and the slow, steady accumulation of knowledge. She learned to use people, to understand their weaknesses and their desires, to turn every whisper into a potential advantage. This covert operation, this quiet gathering of power, was her preparation for the inevitable moment when she would strike. Then came the tempest, a violent outburst that shook the very foundations of the kingdom. The Angoumoise conspiracy of 1560. Do you recall the growing tensions between the dominant Catholic Guise faction and the burgeoning Protestant Huguenot movement? This conspiracy was a desperate, ill-fated attempt by a group of Huguenot nobles to abduct the young king and remove the Guise from power. Imagine the shockwaves that rippled through the court, the sudden, brutal realization of the depth of division. Within France, the Guise reacted with ruthless efficiency, crushing the conspiracy with extreme prejudice. Feel the cold grip of fear as you picture the mass executions, the bodies of the conspirators hanging from the battlements of the Château d'Amboise, a grim warning to all who dared defy the Guise. This horrific spectacle, witnessed by Catherine, profoundly impacted her. It showed her the deadly consequences of open rebellion, the ferocity with which entrenched power would defend itself. It reinforced her belief in cautious, indirect action, in waiting for the perfect moment. She did not condemn the executions, but she also did not fully endorse the Guise's brutal methods. Instead, she tried to position herself as a mediator, a voice of reason in the escalating madness, subtly gaining credibility amidst the chaos. Just as the kingdom reeled from the bloodshed of Angoumoise, a new unforeseen twist of fate delivered the ultimate blow to the Guise's dominance. Do you feel the fragile thread of life, slowly, almost imperceptibly, fraying? The young King Francis II, always frail and sickly, began to succumb to a mysterious illness, perhaps an ear infection that led to an abscess in his brain. His decline was rapid, silent, tragic. Can you hear the frantic whispers of physicians, the muffled sobs of his young wife, Mary, Queen of Scots, as life slowly drained from the boy king? The Guise, who had wielded such immense power through him, watched in helpless despair as their vessel of influence slipped away. And then the moment arrived. The king was dead. In the immediate aftermath of Francis II's passing in December 1560, the court was plunged into a momentary vacuum, a stunned silence. It was in this precise, fleeting instant that Catherine, prepared by years of patient waiting and quiet strategy, acted with lightning speed and decisive brilliance. Imagine her quiet resolve, her mind clear amidst the grief and chaos. She moved swiftly, skillfully, negotiating with Antoine de Bourbon, King of Navarre, who, as the first prince of the blood, might have claimed the regency. She appealed to the Parliament of Paris, the highest court in the land, asserting her right as the mother of the new king. She argued for stability, for the preservation of the monarchy dot, and so, triumphantly, she secured the regency for her next son, the 10-year-old Charles IX. Can you feel the shift in power, the tangible sense of authority settling upon her shoulders? This was her moment, the culmination of years of quiet struggle. She was no longer queen consort, no longer the queen in the shadows, but regent of France, the undisputed ruler until her son came of age. The Guise, though still powerful, had lost their direct link to the throne through Francis II. Catherine, with strategic genius, had seized the reins of power, transforming herself from a marginalized figure into the de facto sovereign. Now, with the vast machinery of the French state at her command, what was her vision for a kingdom teetering on the brink of religious civil war? Her immediate goal, above all else, was stability. She sought to preserve the Valois dynasty, to ensure the power of the monarchy against the rising tide of both Catholic and Protestant extremism. She dreamed of religious reconciliation, of finding a path to peaceful coexistence between the two warring factions. Imagine her, a queen mother with newfound authority, looking out at a fractured kingdom, burdened by the heavy responsibility of healing its deep divisions. She convened conferences, attempted to mediate, and issued edicts aimed at tolerance. But the seeds of conflict had already been sown too deeply, and the forces of religious zealotry were too powerful to be easily appeased. This marked the beginning of her true reign, a period that would be defined by unrelenting challenge, by the shifting sands of alliance and betrayal, and by her desperate, often brutal, attempts to maintain order in a nation tearing itself apart. The stage was set for the darkest chapters of French history, and Catherine, now at the helm, would be at its very heart. Do you remember the fragile hope that bloomed when Catherine seized the regency? Her quiet determination to bring stability and perhaps even peace to a fractured kingdom? Feel now the heavy weight of that responsibility as the whispers of reconciliation give way to the ominous rumbling of war. She truly yearned for peace. Imagine her, a queen mother at the helm, attempting to bridge the chasm between two irreconcilable faiths. She convened conferences like the Colloquy of Poissy in 1561, where Catholic and Protestant theologians gathered, their voices raised in passionate, yet ultimately fruitless, debate. Can you hear the fervent arguments echoing in the grand hall? The clashing interpretations of Scripture, the growing frustration as common ground remained elusive? Catherine listened, she mediated, she pleaded for understanding, pushing for a policy of toleration, a concept radical for its time. She issued the Edict of Saint-Germain in January 1562, granting Protestants limited rights to worship publicly outside walled towns, a bold attempt to diffuse the escalating tensions. It was a testament to her pragmatism, her willingness to seek a middle path, to compromise for the sake of the kingdom's unity. But the forces of hatred and fanaticism were too strong, the wounds too deep. Feel the sudden, brutal impact of an event that shattered all her fragile hopes, pushing France over the precipice into decades of unimaginable bloodshed. The date was March 1st, 1562. In the quiet town of Vassy, a group of unarmed Huguenots gathered. For worship in a barn, were set upon by the armed retainers of the powerful, fiercely Catholic Duke of Guise. Can you hear the sudden shouts, the terrified screams, the horrifying clash of steel against flesh? Imagine the innocent, caught in a whirlwind of violence, their peaceful devotion turned into a scene of unspeakable massacre. This brutal act, the massacre of Vassy, was not merely an isolated incident. It was the spark that ignited the tinderbox of religious hatred. It sent shockwaves throughout France, a chilling declaration of war by one faction against another. Just like that, France plunged headlong into the abyss of the French wars of religion. Do you feel the kingdom tear apart, not with a single dramatic rip, but with 1,000 small, agonizing tears? The quiet fields erupted into battlegrounds. The peaceful villages became sites of brutal atrocities. Catholic fought Protestant, neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. The land groaned under the weight of ceaseless conflict, marked by the thunder of cannons, the cries of the wounded, the mournful tolling of church bells for the dead. Catherine's vision of reconciliation was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of civil war. Her role during these early phases of the wars was one of relentless struggle, a desperate attempt to maintain the semblance of royal authority amidst the chaos. She was caught between two extremist factions, each demanding absolute loyalty, each condemning the other with ferocious zeal. Imagine her moving constantly, tirelessly, between advisors, generals, and diplomats, her mind racing to find a solution. Any solution to the unending bloodshed. She often had to compromise, to make impossible choices, to align herself temporarily with one faction only to shift allegiances later, always with the ultimate goal of preserving the monarchy and thus unity of France. It was a dangerous, cynical dance, misunderstood by many, but driven by a profound need to survive. She was remarkably active, sometimes even risking her own safety by visiting battlefields, attempting to personally mediate between warring factions, her presence a desperate plea for peace amidst the carnage. Can you hear the distant sounds of skirmishes, the desperate appeals for aid, the relentless demands for justice from both sides? The challenge of maintaining royal authority was immense. Powerful nobles, fueled by religious conviction and personal ambition, raised their own armies, defying the crown. Foreign powers, eager to exploit France's weakness, poured money and troops into the conflict, supporting one side or the other, further deepening the divisions. Imagine the sheer exhaustion, the mental fortitude required to navigate such a treacherous landscape. Catherine found herself constantly negotiating, persuading, bribing, and sometimes even threatening to keep the fragile structure of the kingdom from collapsing entirely. She had to ensure that her young son, Charles IX, remained king and more. Then just name that the power of the monarchy did not erode completely under the relentless pressure of civil strife. She learned to play a long game, to wait for opportunities, to exploit divisions among her enemies, always seeking to restore order, even if it meant making distasteful alliances or painful compromises. The grandeur of her court was now tinged with the constant anxiety of war, the quiet elegance of her chambers punctuated by urgent dispatches and grim reports. She was fighting for her children's inheritance, for the very survival of the Valois dynasty, against forces that threatened to engulf them all. Do you feel the deep weariness that must have settled upon her soul, even as her mind remained sharp and her will unyielding? Do you recall the ceaseless turmoil, the bitter divisions that tore at the heart of France during the early years of the religious wars? Feel now the heavy sighs of a queen mother tirelessly striving for a peace that always seemed to slip through her fingers. Catherine's life became a relentless cycle of negotiation and conflict. Truces were declared, offering fleeting moments of quietude, only to be shattered by renewed hostilities, like fragile glass breaking under an unseen force. She poured her energy into finding a middle ground, a way for Catholics and Protestants to coexist But the extremists on both sides, fueled by unwavering conviction and deep-seated hatred, continually sabotaged her efforts. Imagine her frustration, the quiet despair of seeing her dreams of a united France repeatedly crumble. She moved with a weary grace, always seeking the strategic advantage, forever trying to maneuver the pieces on the grand chessboard of her kingdom. After years of this agonizing dance, a fragile hope emerged once more in 1570 with the signing of the Peace of Saint-Germain. Can you feel the collective sigh of relief that swept across the war-weary land? This treaty was a significant concession to the Huguenots, granting them greater religious freedom and even fortified cities as guarantees. Catherine orchestrated this peace, perhaps driven by genuine exhaustion from the unending conflict, or perhaps by a deeper, more calculated strategy. It allowed her to consolidate royal authority, to catch her breath, to plan her next moves. She hoped it would be a lasting calm, a true cessation of the brutal violence that had consumed her kingdom. However, peace, even a hard-won one, often brings its own set of dangers. With the new terms, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, a formidable and respected Huguenot leader, was recalled to court. Can you sense the subtle shift in the king's demeanor, the growing influence of this powerful Protestant figure over her son? King Charles IX? Coligny quickly captivated the young king, charming him with tales of military glory, urging him to declare war on Spain, a Catholic power, and to unite France behind a foreign campaign. Imagine Catherine's growing unease, the quiet alarm bells ringing in her mind as she watched Coligny's persuasive power over her impressionable son. He was effectively sidelining her influence, drawing Charles away from her carefully balanced policies of religious moderation. She saw her painstaking efforts toward stability threatened by this new, dangerous ambition to solidify the peace and truly bridge the chasm between the warring faiths. Catherine conceived of a grand symbolic gesture, a royal wedding. Her favorite daughter, Margot, a radiant beauty, was to marry the young Henry of Navarre, a prominent Huguenot prince and a future king of France. Can you envision the grandeur of the preparations, a vibrant spectacle that brought both Catholic and Protestant nobility to Paris for the celebration? The city buzzed with an intoxicating mix of anticipation and underlying tension. For days leading up to the wedding in August 1572, Catholic and Huguenot nobles, who had only recently been slaughtering each other on battlefields, now mingled in the glittering Parisian salons, a forced, uneasy conviviality. Imagine the rustle of their contrasting attire, the hushed whispers of suspicion mingling with polite laughter. Catherine hoped this union would be the final, indelible seal on a lasting peace, a joyous symbol of a reunited France. But beneath the festive facade, currents of immense danger swirled. Do you feel the tightening in the air, the growing sense of dread as the dream of peace began to curdle? Just days after the wedding, on August 22, 1572, a shot rang out. Admiral Coligny was targeted in an attempted assassination, struck by a bullet but not killed. Can you hear the sudden gasp, the panicked shouts, the immediate shattering of any remaining illusion of peace? The streets of Paris erupted in furious speculation. The Huguenots were outraged, convinced that the Guises, their bitter enemies, were responsible, and they threatened swift, terrible retaliation. Imagine Catherine's mounting panic, her fear reaching a fever pitch. Coligny, wounded but alive, now demanded justice, threatening to expose those responsible. King Charles IX, torn between his respect for Coligny and his deep-seated fear of civil war, vowed to investigate. But Catherine knew, or at least she suspected who was truly behind the failed assassination. Her own allies, the Guys and other ultra-Catholics, fearful of Coligny's growing influence and the king's increasingly pro-Huguenot stance, had likely acted without her direct knowledge, or perhaps with her silent, desperate wish for Coligny to be removed. The situation was spiraling out of control. Coligny's continued presence, his power over her son, and the imminent threat of Huguenot reprisal terrified her. She saw the fragile peace crumbling, about to unleash a new, even bloodier war in the dead of night, amidst the escalating panic and the fervent pleas of the ultra-Catholic faction. Catherine made a chilling, desperate choice. Do you hear the hushed, urgent voices? The clinking of steel as weapons are readied? She, along with a small, terrified council, pressed the young, weak-willed King Charles IX to act, to eliminate the Huguenot leadership before they could retaliate. Her arguments were ruthless. Coligny was plotting against the crown, the Huguenots. Were planning an uprising, it was them or us. Charles, pushed to the brink of a nervous breakdown, finally screamed, "Then kill them all, so that not one remains to reproach me." And so, the fateful command was given, a decision born of fear, political expediency, and the absolute desperation to preserve the Valois monarchy at any cost. The city of Paris, already simmering with tension, was about to explode into an inferno of blood and terror. The bells, which had rung for a wedding, would soon toll for a massacre. Do you remember the chilling command given by King Charles IX, urged on by his desperate mother? Then kill them all, so that not one remains to reproach me. Feel now the creeping dread that descends upon Paris as the first. Tentative light of August 24th, 1572, attempts to pierce the pre-dawn gloom. The city, still heavy with the festive air of the royal wedding, was about to be transformed into a terrifying landscape of blood and terror. The signal was given, an order whispered from man to man, knife to throat. Imagine, if you can bear it, the sudden, ominous peal of the bell of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois ringing out in the stillness of the early morning. It was not a joyous peal, but a death knell, a chilling call to arms for the Catholic mobs. Can you hear it? A single, clear note, amplified by the heavy air, slicing through the quiet sleep of the city, rousing both victim and perpetrator? And then another bell, and another, until the very air vibrated with a cacophony of sound, a terrifying symphony of destruction. The silence of the night was shattered by screams. The first, agonizing cries of unsuspecting victims, quickly followed by the roars of the mob, the frantic clang of weapons, the splintering of doors. The chaos was immediate, overwhelming, a torrent of violence unleashed with savage abandon. One of the very first to fall was Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the prominent Huguenot leader whose influence over King Charles IX had so deeply alarmed Catherine. Imagine his final moments, roused from sleep, facing his attackers with a stoicism born of faith and courage. His body was thrown from a window, a chilling symbol of the night's murderous intent. Can you hear the sickening thud as he hit the cobblestones below, the triumphant shouts of his killers? This was the primary target, the strategic decapitation of the Protestant leadership that Catherine and her ultra-Catholic allies had sought. But the mob, once unleashed, knew no bounds, recognized no limits. The violence quickly spiraled beyond any initial strategic intent, becoming an indiscriminate slaughter. For Catherine, in those terrifying hours, the world must have blurred into a maelstrom of desperate rationale. Can you sense her chilling conviction, born of fear and pragmatic necessity, that this horrific act was the only way? In her mind, she was not committing murder. She was saving the monarchy, preventing a full-scale civil war that she believed Coligny and his followers were about to ignite. She was protecting her son, her dynasty, the very fabric of France, even if it meant sacrificing thousands of lives. Imagine her internal justification, a surgical strike intended to remove the heads of the Protestant faction, to force submission, to finally end the cycle of rebellion. This was the moment where her ruthless, pragmatic core truly revealed itself, where the survival of her family outweighed all other considerations. It was a choice of unimaginable weight, a decision that would haunt her legacy forever. The horror continued through the night and into the following days. Can you picture the scenes of unspeakable brutality? The streets of Paris ran red with blood, piled high with corpses. Houses were ransacked, Huguenots dragged from their beds, slaughtered, without mercy. Men, women, and even children became victims of the frenzied mob, their desperate pleas swallowed by the screams of their attackers. The stench of blood and death hung heavy in the air. This was not confined to Paris alone. The violence, like a contagious disease, spread to other cities across France, carried by the terrifying news, sparking similar massacres. Protestant Europe reacted with profound shock and outrage, their condemnation echoing across the continent, forever associating Catherine and her son with this unspeakable atrocity. And what of King Charles IX, the young monarch who had given the final agonizing order? Do you feel his torment, the desperate struggle within his own soul? He was a king haunted by his command, a fragile young man overwhelmed by the magnitude of his decision. Some accounts suggest he was tormented by the cries and visions of the dead, his sleep disturbed by nightmares. Catherine, ever the protective mother, ever the shrewd politician, worked tirelessly to control the narrative, to justify the massacre as a preventative measure against a Huguenot plot, a necessary act of state to save the kingdom. She forced Charles to claim responsibility, to declare that the slaughter was a royal act, an act of justice against traitors, not a religious pogrom. She tried to shape the historical record even as the blood was still wet on the streets. The immediate political fallout was catastrophic. The massacre did not end the religious wars. It merely intensified them, deepening the hatred, cementing the divisions. The conflict now took on an even more brutal, uncompromising character. The Huguenots, far from being extinguished, were galvanized, their resolve hardened by the martyrdom of their brethren. Catherine found herself presiding over a kingdom steeped in blood, its future more uncertain than ever. She had gambled everything on one horrific act, and while it had temporarily crippled the Protestant leadership, it had also ignited an unquenchable fire of vengeance. Can you sense the profound, chilling irony of her desperate gamble for peace, leading only to more war, more suffering? The echoes of that terrible night would reverberate through the rest of her reign, a constant, mournful reminder of the price of power and the chilling compromises made in its name. Do you recall the echoes of the bells on St. Bartholomew's Day, the chilling cries that reverberated through the streets of Paris, leaving behind a profound stillness punctuated by fear? Feel, now, the pervasive atmosphere that settled over the court and the kingdom in the wake of that unspeakable horror. A tense quietude, an uneasy calm, often more terrifying than outright chaos. Distrust became an invisible shroud, enveloping everyone. Huguenots who had survived fled or converted, many harboring deep-seated vengeance. Catholics, too, were divided, some celebrating, others horrified by the brutality. But amidst this chilling tension, Catherine de Medici asserted her control. With a firm, unwavering hand, she moved through the court with a somber dignity, outwardly calm, yet inwardly calculating, determined to project an image of strength and stability, even as the ground beneath her feet felt perilously thin. Imagine her constant vigilance, the way her eyes, though perhaps weary, missed nothing. She was perpetually assessing, evaluating threats, seeking to manage the impossible narrative of the massacre. The air in the royal chambers often felt thick with unspoken accusations, with the weight of unshed tears and the phantom scent of blood. Yet Catherine endured, driven by an unyielding will to protect her children and the monarchy. She knew that the world was watching, judging, and she worked tirelessly to present the massacre as a necessary act of state, a preemptive strike against treason, rather than a religious purge. But the price of that horrific night weighed heavily, most visibly upon King Charles IX, her young son. Do you feel the slow, agonizing decline of a soul burdened by an unimaginable command? Charles, already fragile, never truly recovered from the psychological trauma of authorizing the massacre. He became increasingly withdrawn, plagued by coughing, fits, fevers, and what many described as a profound melancholia. Imagine his restless nights, perhaps filled with vivid nightmares, his days marked by a growing paranoia and fits of despair. His body withered, his spirit dimmed. Catherine watched him with a mother's grief, mingled with a regent's frustration. She tried to bolster him, to coax him into his royal duties, but the light had gone out of his eyes. He spoke of visions, of the dead rising, of the blood on his hands. She was caught between profound concern for her son and the pragmatic necessity of maintaining his public image as a capable king, even as he slowly slipped away. During these grim years, another of Catherine's sons began to rise to prominence. Henry, Duke of Anjou. Can you sense the shift in her focus, the quiet hope she placed in this energetic, ambitious young man? Henry was her favorite, her most charismatic and capable son, a true warrior who had proven his military prowess in the ongoing religious wars. He was the hero of Yarnoch and Moncontour, Catholic victories that had brought fleeting moments of triumph amidst the relentless conflict. Imagine her pride as she heard tales of his bravery, his strategic acumen. He was everything Charles was not: vigorous, confident, seemingly destined for greatness. He represented her best hope for the future of the dynasty, a strong hand to eventually guide France. Then came an unexpected, yet politically brilliant, turn of events that would momentarily draw Henry away from France. Do you hear the distant echoes of international diplomacy, the rustle of royal decrees carried across borders? In 1573, through Catherine's tireless negotiations and strategic maneuvering, Henry of Anjou was elected King of Poland. Imagine her mixed emotions: immense pride for her favored son achieving such a grand distinction, yet a profound sense of loss at his impending departure. He was leaving France, leaving her just when his strength was most needed. She knew it. Was a prestigious match, a feather in the Valois cap, but it also meant a temporary vacuum of strong leadership at home, leaving her once again to manage the increasingly unstable kingdom alone. The farewell was tearful, a poignant moment between a mother and her departing, beloved son. Tragically, just as Henry settled into his new role in distant Poland, the fragile life of King Charles IX finally extinguished itself. Do you feel the quiet sorrow, the melancholic closing of a chapter? On May 30th, 1574, after years of suffering, Charles died at the young age of 23. His death, though long anticipated, was still a profound personal loss for Catherine. She had watched him wither, a king consumed by his own throne, and her grief was genuine. But even in her mourning, her political instincts were paramount. The kingdom could not afford a moment of uncertainty. Imagine her immediate, decisive action. A woman whose life had trained her for this very moment. With lightning speed and unwavering resolve, Catherine secured her second regency. She was no longer just the Queen Mother. She was the de facto ruler of France once more, a powerful matriarch holding the kingdom together until her absent son could return. Messages were dispatched at furious speed across Europe, urging Henry to abandon his Polish crown and return to claim his rightful place as King Henry III of France. Can you hear the urgent pounding of hooves, the rustle of important dispatches carried by swift messengers across mountains and plains? Her challenge was immense: to maintain order, suppress dissent, and ensure a smooth transition of power while her designated king was thousands of miles away. She ruled in his stead, signing documents. Catherine, Queen Mother of the King, Regent of France, a clear declaration of her absolute authority. The weight of the crown, once again, rested firmly upon her capable, albeit weary, shoulders. She was once more the central pillar, the unbreakable force holding a shattered kingdom from crumbling completely. Do you recall Catherine's decisive action, securing her second regency, signing documents as Queen Mother of the King, Regent of France, while her favored son, Henry, was far away, reigning as king in distant Poland? Feel now the quiet tension of anticipation, the long wait for his return. Henry, though he loved his mother, was reluctant to leave his new kingdom. He enjoyed the power, the novelty, the relative peace. But France, his true inheritance, beckoned, and Catherine's urgent dispatches finally compelled him. Imagine the long, arduous journey across Europe, the miles stretching out beneath his horse's hooves, each one bringing him closer to a throne that was as much a burden as a privilege. Can you hear the distant echoes of his reluctant farewells, the quiet farewells to a crown he had barely worn? His return to France was met with a mix of relief and wary expectation. For Catherine, it was a moment of profound joy, seeing her beloved son back, ready to assume the crown. She had groomed him for this role, pinning all her hopes on his strength and intelligence. But as King Henry III took the throne, the complexities of his character began to fully reveal themselves. Do you sense the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the contrast that would define his reign? He was a man of refined tastes, deeply cultured, with a love for art, fashion, and intellectual pursuits. But he was also, in many ways, an enigma, sometimes decisive, often indecisive, prone to fits of melancholy, and perhaps, tragically, too effeminate for the expectations of a brutal, war-torn age. He preferred the company of his mignons, his male favorites, to the traditional duties of kingship, creating whispers and resentment among the established nobility. The challenges he faced were immense and immediate. The religious wars continued to rage, a festering wound on the body of France. Powerful factions, led by ambitious nobles, vied for control, their loyalties shifting like desert sands. The royal treasury was perpetually empty, a constant drain on his authority. Imagine the heavy weight of the crown settling upon his head, not as a symbol of glory, but as a burden of relentless problems. Throughout this period, Catherine remained an undeniable force, a constant presence at her son's side. Do you see her, always observing, always advising, her sharp mind working tirelessly, even as her body began to show the signs of age? She was his most trusted counselor, his most loyal supporter, often traveling with him, attending council meetings, and even drafting his letters. She continued her relentless work for peace, her pragmatic approach often clashing with Henry's more erratic or zealous tendencies. But beneath her unwavering support, you can sense a growing frustration. Henry, though intelligent, often lacked the consistent resolve of his mother. His indecisiveness, his extravagant lifestyle, and his favoritism alienated key players and undermined his own authority, making Catherine's task of stabilizing the kingdom all the more difficult. Imagine her quiet sighs of exasperation, the unspoken corrections she had to offer, the careful guidance she constantly provided to a son who, though king, often seemed to stray from the path of sound governance. As Henry III grappled with the chaos of his reign, a new, even more dangerous storm began to gather on the horizon, one that would be known to history as the War of the Three Henrys. Can you hear the distant thunder, the ominous clash of three powerful wills destined to collide? The kingdom was now fragmented among three dominant figures, each named Henry, each vying for ultimate control. First, there was King Henry III himself, the rightful monarch, but struggling to assert his authority. Then there was Henry of Navarre, the tenacious Huguenot leader, now her son-in-law, a legitimate heir presumptive to the childless Henry III. And finally, the most formidable challenger, Henry, Duke of Guise, a charismatic leader of the ultra-Catholic League, immensely popular with the Parisian populace, who sought to dominate the monarchy, perhaps even usurp it. Catherine, with her deep understanding of these powerful personalities and their ambitions, found herself in the agonizing position of trying to mediate, to play one against the other, to prevent their inevitable collision from utterly destroying France. Imagine her ceaseless diplomatic efforts, her attempts to soothe ruffled feathers, to appeal to reason where little existed. She held meetings, she sent envoys, she proposed alliances, all with the desperate hope of averting total catastrophe. Despite her advancing years and growing infirmities, Catherine undertook incredibly arduous diplomatic journeys across France. Can you feel the physical strain, the mental fortitude required to travel for months, often through war-torn territories, enduring discomfort and danger? She would meet with faction leaders, with powerful nobles, sometimes even riding into their strongholds, a brave figure seeking peace through personal persuasion. These were not leisurely royal progresses. They were missions of vital importance, exhausting and often disheartening. She sought to negotiate, to cajole, to offer concessions, always with the aim of preserving the Valois dynasty and the unity of France. She was, in essence, the last true bridge between these warring factions, a living embodiment of the struggle for stability in a kingdom consumed by internecine conflict. She saw her children's future, the very future of France, teetering on the edge of a precipice, and she fought, with every fiber of her being, to pull it back from the brink. Do you sense the profound, unrelenting burden that she carried, day in and day out, in her desperate fight for peace? Do you recall Catherine's tireless journeys, her desperate attempts to mediate between the three formidable Henrys, trying to avert the seemingly inevitable conflict? Feel now the heavy realization that some destinies cannot be altered. No matter how great the effort. The War of the Three Henrys, a conflict of unparalleled complexity and bitterness, finally erupted, plunging France into another decade of relentless bloodshed. Imagine the vastness of the land, once vibrant, now scarred by battlefields, its towns and villages caught between warring factions. Can you hear the distant sounds of marching armies, the frantic beat of drums, the mournful cries of a nation exhausted by decades of civil strife? Henry III, the king, struggled to maintain his throne. Henry of Navarre, his determined Protestant brother-in-law and heir presumptive, fought valiantly for his rights. And Henry, Duke of Guise, the charismatic leader of the Catholic League, commanded the fierce loyalty of a devout populace, aiming to dictate the very future of France. As the war raged, the fragile authority of King Henry III seemed to fray, his grip on the kingdom weakening with each passing day. Do you sense his growing desperation? The subtle tremor in his voice as he faced insurmountable problems? He found himself increasingly reliant on his mother's counsel, her strategic acumen, her vast network of information. He would turn to her for advice, for solutions, for the strength he often lacked. Imagine their quiet meetings, the whispered conversations in the dead of night, Catherine patiently dissecting the political landscape, offering her seasoned wisdom. Yet a bitter resentment simmered beneath Henry's dependence. He chafed under his mother's powerful influence, yearning for undisputed authority, even as he secretly leaned on her unwavering support. He wanted to be his own man, but the complexities of the kingdom continually forced him back into her formidable shadow. The true threat to Henry III's throne, however, came from within his own capital, from the burgeoning power of Henry, Duke of Guise. Do you feel the collective devotion of the Parisian populace, turning away from their king and towards this heroic, charismatic figure? The Catholic League, under Guise's fiery leadership, became a state within a state, their influence in Paris almost absolute. The streets of the city resonated with their fervent cries, their militant parades, their unwavering commitment to rooting out heresy and placing a truly Catholic monarch on the throne. Imagine Catherine watching this alarming development, her heart heavy with dread. She saw the Duke of Guise as an existential threat, a man whose ambition knew no bounds, who sought to eclipse the monarchy itself. She knew that Henry III's crown was in mortal peril, and with it, the entire Valois dynasty. Then came the day it shook the very foundations of royal power, the day of the barricades. In May 1588, can you hear the sudden uproar in the streets of Paris, the frantic shouts, the ominous clanging as citizens erected barricades with astonishing speed? Henry III, attempting to assert his authority by bringing Swiss guards into the city, inadvertently sparked an open rebellion. The people of Paris, spurred on by the Catholic League, rose up en masse, constructing formidable barriers that trapped the royal forces. Imagine the sheer humiliation for the king, trapped in his own palace, unable to move, unable to command. He was forced to flee the city under cover of darkness, escaping Paris in disguise, a king running from his own rebellious subjects. This was a catastrophic blow to royal prestige, a stark demonstration of the Duke of Guise's overwhelming popular power. In the chaotic aftermath, Catherine, despite her advanced age and growing infirmity, once again stepped forward as the desperate mediator. Do you feel her profound weariness, the deep sigh of a woman carrying an unbearable burden? She met personally with the triumphant Duke of Guise, countless times, tirelessly attempting to negotiate, to reason, to find a way to restore her son's authority without further bloodshed. Imagine these arduous meetings, often lasting for hours, her voice soft but firm, her mind razor-sharp as she pleaded, persuaded, and subtly threatened. She offered concessions, she made promises, all in a desperate bid to preserve the remnants of royal power. She was fighting a battle. She knew she might not win, but her resolve was absolute. Her physical strength was failing, but her mental fortitude remained indomitable, a final flickering flame in the gathering gloom. As the year drew to a close, Henry III, fueled by a desperate desire to reclaim his authority and haunted by the humiliation of the day of the barricades, convened the Estates General at Blois in late 1588. Can you feel the heavy tension in the air, the sense of an impending, fateful decision? It was a gathering of the three estates of France clergy, nobility, and commoners summoned to address the dire state of the kingdom. But for Henry, it was a trap, a meticulously planned moment of reckoning. The Duke of Guise, basking in his popularity, arrived confident and defiant. Catherine, though ill and frail, was present, likely sensing the dark currents swirling beneath. The polite formalities. She may have had a premonition, a chilling intuition of the drastic action her son, driven to the very edge of his sanity and power, was about to take. The stage was set for a betrayal so profound, it would unravel the last threads of their family's destiny. Do you remember the palpable tension within the Estates General at Blois, the sense of an impending fateful decision as King Henry III convened his kingdom's representatives? Feel now the sharp, sudden chill that pierced the festive air of Christmas in December 1588, driven to the very brink of desperation, humiliated by the day of the barricades, and convinced that his powerful rival sought to usurp his throne. Henry III resolved upon a drastic, shocking act. He decided to eliminate the man who had overshadowed him, the magnetic leader of the Catholic League, Henry, Duke of Guise. Imagine the meticulous planning, the hushed instructions, the king's own hands, perhaps trembling slightly, signing the fatal orders. On the morning of December 23, 1588, the Duke of Guise, confident in his power and seemingly oblivious to the trap, was summoned to the king's private chambers in the Château de Blaye. Can you hear his confident footsteps echoing in the corridor, the faint rustle of his rich robes as he approached his doom? As he entered, he was set upon by the king's own bodyguards, the 45, who stabbed him repeatedly, viciously. Imagine the brutal, muffled sounds of the struggle, the desperate gasps, the swift, chilling efficiency of the assassination. Henry III himself emerged from an adjoining room to gaze upon the lifeless body of his formidable enemy, a silent, grim triumph in his eyes. He had removed his greatest rival, not by battle, but by cold, calculated murder. And what of Catherine, his mother, lying gravely ill in her own apartments in the same castle? Do you feel the deep tremor that must have passed through her, even from a distance, as if sensing the profound rupture in the very fabric of their family, of the kingdom? It is whispered that Henry visited her immediately after the assassination, perhaps seeking validation, perhaps boasting of his decisive act. Some accounts suggest she responded with a weary, knowing sigh, or a chilling admonition. You have cut the cloth well, my son, but you must know how to sew it. Did she approve? Did she know beforehand? The truth remains shrouded in the mists of history. But one thing is certain. The brutal act of regicide against a powerful subject, committed by her own son, broke something deep within her. Her already frail health, weakened by decades of relentless struggle and profound grief, deteriorated rapidly after this event. Her spirit, perhaps, had finally been exhausted by the endless cycle of violence and betrayal. Imagine her feverish dreams, perhaps haunted by the ghost of the man her son had so ruthlessly dispatched. This act solidified the chasm between Henry III and his Catholic subjects, pushing the kingdom into an even deeper abyss. And she, his mother, had played her last, desperate hand out to solidify his control. The very next day, December 24, 1588, Henry III ordered the assassination of the Duke's brother, Louis, Cardinal of Guise, also held at Blois. Can you hear the chilling finality of these two swift blows, designed to decapitate the entire Guise faction? This audacious, brutal act, intended to restore royal authority, had precisely the opposite effect. The kingdom erupted in widespread outrage and rebellion. Do you feel the furious shock waves spreading from Blois, igniting the flames of vengeance across France? Paris, the heartland of the Catholic League, and fiercely devoted to the martyred Duke of Guise, declared itself in open revolt against King Henry III. Cities across the country followed suit, refusing to acknowledge his authority, viewing him as a tyrant and a murderer. Henry III, once again, found himself an isolated king, stripped of the loyalty of his capital and much of his kingdom, surrounded by enemies, with no reliable allies in his own Catholic camp. His desperate gamble had backfired spectacularly, pushing him to the very precipice of ruin. Meanwhile, back in Blois, Catherine lay dying. Do you hear her labored breaths, the quiet ticking of the clock beside her bed, marking her final moments? Her powerful mind, though clouded by illness, would have been filled with the crushing weight of her family's desperate plight, the impending doom of the Valois dynasty. She had spent her entire life fighting for them, for their power, for their survival. Now she saw it all crumbling around her. Her children were dying young. Her favorite son, the king, had alienated his own people, and the heir presumptive was a Protestant. Imagine her final reflections. The long journey from orphan child to powerful regent, the impossible choices, the profound sacrifices, the blood on her hands from the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, all for a kingdom that still seemed determined to tear itself apart. Her legacy, she must have feared, was one of failure, her ceaseless efforts ultimately in vain. And so, quietly, fittingly, on January 5th, 1589, Catherine de Medici passed from this world. Do you sense the profound stillness that descended upon the Château de Blois, as if the very air itself paused to mark the departure of such a formidable force? She died without a priest to administer the last rites, a poignant reflection of the chaotic, divided times in which she lived. Her death, though overshadowed by the greater political turmoil, left an undeniable void. The woman who had been the very pivot of French politics for nearly 30 years, the driving force behind 3 young kings, was gone. Her departure signaled the end of an era, leaving Henry III truly alone to face the storm he had unleashed. The last steadying hand had been lifted, and the Valois dynasty, without her unwavering guidance, would soon follow her into the silent, echoing chambers of history. Do you remember the profound stillness that settled upon Blois with Catherine's last breath? The quiet finality of her passing in January 1589? Feel now the sudden, terrifying vacuum she left behind. Her beloved son, King Henry III, found himself utterly alone, utterly isolated. His audacious assassinations of the Guise brothers, meant to consolidate his power, had instead ignited a firestorm of rebellion. Paris, the heart of his kingdom, lay in the hands of the enraged Catholic League, who now openly denounced him as a tyrant and a murderer. He was a king without a capital, abandoned by his most powerful subjects. In his desperate plight, stripped of his mother's shrewd counsel, Henry III was forced to turn to the most unlikely of allies, his former enemy, the very man he had once warred against, the tenacious Protestant leader, Henry of Navarre. Can you sense the profound irony, the desperate necessity of this alliance? Imagine the 2 Henrys meeting, their shared predicament forging an uneasy truce, a bond born of mutual peril rather than affection. The Catholic king and the Protestant heir presumptive, uniting against their common foe, the fanatical Catholic League. It was a partnership unthinkable just months before, a testament to the chaotic, topsy-turvy world Catherine had left behind. Together, their combined royal and Huguenot forces began the siege of Paris. Do you hear the distant rumbling of their armies, the measured thud of siege engines, the determined advance of soldiers converging on the defiant city? It was a symbolic moment, a desperate attempt to reclaim the heart of France. Imagine the tension within the city walls, the fervent prayers of the Catholic Leaguers, their defiant cries against the king they now considered an apostate. The very air around Paris vibrated with the anticipation of a bloody, decisive confrontation. But fate, cruel and swift, intervened once more. Do you feel the sudden, chilling twist of destiny? As the siege pressed on August 1st, 1589, King Henry III was fatally stabbed by a fanatical Dominican friar named Jacques Clement, who had gained access to him under the pretense of delivering an important message. Imagine the sudden, horrifying shock, the king falling, his lifeblood seeping onto the floor. It was a swift, brutal end to the last Valois king of France. He lingered for a day, enduring his final agony with a quiet dignity, but the wound was mortal. Can you hear his dying whispers? Perhaps a final plea for unity, a final recognition of his chosen successor? With Henry III's death, the Valois dynasty, which had ruled France for over 260 years, came to an abrupt, tragic end. Do you sense the profound historical significance of this moment, the closing of a long and complex chapter in French history? The direct male line of Catherine's husband, Henry II, was extinguished. All her relentless efforts, all her desperate choices to secure and preserve the Valois line had ultimately led to this stark, undeniable conclusion. The crown, now without a direct Valois heir, fell to the man who had been at the very edge of the succession, the most unlikely of candidates. And so, Henry of Navarre, the Protestant leader, became King Henry IV of France. Can you hear the cautious murmurs of recognition, the reluctant acknowledgments from a largely Catholic nation? His path to the throne was still fraught with peril. He would have to fight for years to consolidate his power, to convert to Catholicism with the famous pragmatic declaration, "Paris is worth a mass," and ultimately to bring a fragile, enduring peace to his war-weary kingdom with the Edict of Nantes. He would prove to be a popular and effective ruler, one of France's greatest kings, but his ascension marked the final, undeniable end of Catherine's immediate Valois legacy. In the immediate aftermath of these tumultuous events, Catherine de Medici's own legacy began to take shape, often in harsh and unforgiving ways. Do you feel the heavy weight of historical judgment, the swift condemnation that followed her? For many, especially Protestant chroniclers, she was swiftly branded as the Black Queen, the Machiavellian Italian, the orchestrator of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Her Italian origins, once a source of Medici pride, became a convenient scapegoat for all of France's ills. Imagine the portraits painted of her, often grim and severe, the stories whispered in the streets, portraying her as a cold, calculating, and cruel figure. The complexity of her character, the desperate circumstances she navigated, the pragmatic reasons behind her often ruthless decisions, were largely overlooked or deliberately obscured by the victorious narratives of her enemies and the simplified judgments of history. She was condemned for the very things she did to preserve her family and her kingdom, becoming a convenient villain in the bloody drama of her age. Do you recall the harsh judgment that swiftly descended upon Catherine after her death, branding her as the Black Queen, the cold, calculating Italian orchestrator of unspeakable horrors? Feel now the weight of that label, the pervasive image of a truly Machiavellian ruler. Indeed, she was well versed in the political treatises of Niccolò Machiavelli, a fellow Florentine whose works explored the realities of power, often suggesting that a ruler must, at times, be prepared to act ruthlessly to prioritize the security of the state above all else. Imagine her perhaps in the quiet hours of the night, poring over such texts, absorbing the stark lessons about human nature and the necessities of governance. This knowledge, combined with her experiences in the cutthroat world of Italian Renaissance, politics shaped her approach, making her a pragmatist in an age of fervent idealism and brutal zealotry. To many of her contemporaries, particularly the French nobility and foreign observers, her methods seemed foreign, even sinister, a stark contrast to the chivalric ideals they often claimed to uphold. But to truly understand Catherine, you must first comprehend the blinding intensity of the religious extremism that consumed the 16th century. Do you sense the fervent, unyielding conviction that gripped both Catholics and Protestants, each side believing themselves to be the sole possessors of divine truth, each prepared to die and to kill for their faith? This was an era when acts of horrifying brutality were committed by all factions in the name of God. Villages were razed, populations slaughtered, not just by royal decree, but by zealous mobs and partisan armies. Catherine, while undeniably involved in the violence of her time, was not, at her core, a religious fanatic. Imagine her, a woman whose true religion was the preservation of her family, the Valois dynasty, and the fragile unity of France. She was a political pragmatist trying to navigate an age of religious zeal, attempting to find a middle way where none truly existed. Her ruthlessness, when it emerged, was less about religious hatred and more about a desperate, cold calculation to maintain power, to prevent total anarchy. Her primary, unyielding goal was always the survival of the French monarchy, the continuation of the Valois line through her children. Do you feel the immense pressure she bore? The relentless burden of ensuring the dynasty's future amidst civil war, foreign meddling, and the constant threat of usurpation. Every ruthless decision, every painful compromise, every calculated betrayal can be traced back to this central, desperate necessity. Imagine the sleepless nights, the endless strategizing, the agonizing choices she had to make, knowing that the wrong move could mean the utter destruction of everything she had fought for. She believed that absolute power, even if wielded with a heavy hand, was essential to prevent France from fragmenting into warring fiefdoms, to hold the kingdom together in the face of centrifugal forces. Her actions, seen through the lens of pure survival, appear less like wanton cruelty and more like the desperate measures of a leader trapped in an impossible situation. Her Italian background, a source of pride and intellectual depth, also contributed to her villainization in France. Do you hear the subtle whispers of xenophobia, the ingrained suspicion of foreigners in the French court? The Medici name, while synonymous with power and wealth, also carried connotations of cunning and ambition, qualities often viewed with distrust in a more traditional feudal society. Her sophisticated, often subtle political maneuvering, so common in the city-states of Renaissance Italy, was misinterpreted or condemned as duplicity by French nobles accustomed to more direct, often brutal, forms of power. She was perceived as an outsider, an exotic, dangerous influence, a stark contrast to the French queens who came before her dot. And then there is the undeniable element of gender bias. Do you sense the implicit prejudice, the harsher judgment reserved for a powerful woman in a male-dominated world? Traits that might have been overlooked or even admired in a male ruler: decisiveness, ruthlessness, strategic thinking, were often condemned as unnatural or wicked in a woman. Imagine the societal expectations of a queen: pious, gentle, fertile, submissive. Catherine was fertile, yes, but her very intelligence, her political acumen, and her willingness to assert authority challenged these traditional notions. She was not content to be a mere figurehead, and for this she was often vilified. Her strength was perceived as aggression, her pragmatism as coldness, her survival instincts as Machiavellian manipulation. Finally, consider the immense power of propaganda. Do you hear the relentless, often distorted narratives spread by her? Enemies? The Huguenots, devastated by the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, painted her as a bloodthirsty tyrant, a Jezebel. The Guise faction, after her son's assassination of their leaders, intensified their attacks, blaming her for all their woes. Foreign powers, eager to weaken France, amplified these accusations. Imagine the pamphlets, the sermons, the whispered rumors, all conspiring to blacken her name, to create a monstrous image that would resonate through time. Her silence, her dignified refusal to engage in public recrimination, only allowed these narratives to take deeper root. She became the convenient scapegoat for the intractable problems of a torn nation, a figure onto whom all the anxieties and failures of the age could be projected. The real Catherine, a complex woman of immense intellect, enduring resilience, and profound maternal love, became buried beneath layers of political expediency and historical judgment. Do you remember the stark, often unforgiving image of Catherine, shaped by political necessity and the cruel brushstrokes of propaganda? Let us now soften that focus and discover the vibrant colors of her spirit, the profound ways in which she enriched the very fabric of France, leaving behind a legacy far beyond the battlefield and the council chamber. For Catherine was not merely a politician. She was a true daughter of the Florentine Renaissance, a connoisseur of beauty, a patron of innovation, and a fervent believer in the power of art and intellect that imagine her fascination with architecture, her keen eye for design. She brought with her from Italy a sophisticated taste, a love for grandeur and proportion that would transform the French landscape. Can you envision the majestic gardens she commissioned for the Tuileries Palace, designed with elaborate grottos and fountains, a testament to her desire for order and beauty, even amidst chaos? She oversaw the construction of her own magnificent residence, the Hôtel de Soissons, within which stood her iconic astronomical column, a silent, graceful testament to her interest in the sciences, a place where she consulted her astrologers, seeking guidance from the stars themselves. Feel the cool stone under your fingers. Imagine the intricate carvings, the soaring arches, each a silent witness to her profound artistic sensibility. She fostered a generation of architects, artists, and artisans, inviting them to her court, showering them with patronage, ensuring that the spirit of the Italian Renaissance found a fertile home in France. Her influence extended far beyond bricks and mortar. Do you taste the subtle flavors, hear the delicate strains of music that she introduced to the French court? She is credited with bringing many Italian culinary innovations to France, transforming the simpler medieval fare into a more refined and varied cuisine. Imagine the introduction of forks, of new vegetables, of the art of pastry making small, delicious revolutions that subtly changed daily life at court. And perhaps most famously, she is considered the mother of French ballet. Can you picture the elaborate, dazzling performances she staged, culminating in the magnificent Ballet Comique de la Reine in 1581? This was not mere entertainment. It was a sophisticated art form, blending music, dance, poetry, and intricate sets designed to convey political messages and showcase the splendor of the monarchy. She brought grace, elegance, and a sophisticated theatricality to a court that had previously been more focused on hunting and jousting. Beyond the visible splendor, her mind remained a formidable instrument. Do you sense the quiet power of her intellect, her mastery of diplomacy, honed by countless years of negotiation? Even her harshest critics acknowledged her sharp intelligence, her tireless work ethic, her ability to grasp complex political situations with remarkable clarity. She understood the intricate web of European alliances, the shifting loyalties of her own nobles, and the delicate art of persuasion. Her political correspondence alone fills volumes, revealing a strategic mind constantly at work, drafting treaties, securing loans, dispatching envoys, always with an eye toward stability. She was a master of the covert, too, using her famed network of informants, not just for plotting, but for gathering vital intelligence that allowed her to anticipate threats and respond strategically. And let us never forget the core of her being, her profound, unwavering maternal devotion. Do you feel the fierce, protective love that drove her, even in her most controversial actions? Every strategic alliance, every political maneuver, even the horrifying decision of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, was, in her mind, ultimately aimed at preserving her children and their dynastic future. She saw herself as the guardian of the Valois legacy, fighting a relentless battle to secure the throne for her sons, to prevent the kingdom she loved from dissolving into ruin. Imagine her in the quiet of her chambers, praying for her children, agonizing over their fragile health, their often difficult personalities, and the dangers that surrounded them. Her love, though sometimes expressed in harsh, pragmatic ways, was the fundamental wellspring of her strength, and her ceaseless efforts. In many ways, Catherine de Medici was a modern stateswoman long before the term existed. Do you see her, standing at the crossroads of a turbulent era, navigating complexities that few leaders, male or female, could have mastered? She understood the delicate balance of power, the necessity of compromise, and the brutal realities of governance in a deeply divided nation. She built alliances, managed internal factions, and tirelessly worked to prevent the collapse of France, often acting as the sole steady hand guiding the ship of state through relentless storms. Her understanding of diplomacy and political psychology was far ahead of her time, making her a figure of immense, if often controversial, influence. Her story, therefore, is so much more than the singular, terrible stain of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. It is a testament to the enduring human capacity for resilience, for strategic thought, for artistic patronage, and for a fierce, protective love that shaped a continent. It is a story of a woman who, against impossible odds, dared to lead, dared to innovate, and dared to make the agonizing choices required to survive in a world consumed by faith, power, and the ever-present threat of oblivion. Her complex legacy, therefore, invites us to look beyond the simplistic labels and to contemplate the profound impact of a life lived at the very heart of European history. Do you remember the complex tapestry we have woven together, charting Catherine's journey from orphan child to powerful regent, from feared Black Queen to enlightened Renaissance patron? Feel now the rich texture of her legacy, a testament to a life so multifaceted, so driven by an almost unbearable set of circumstances, that it continues to defy simple categorization. Her story, though centuries old, still breathes with a vibrant, unsettling energy, a silent hum in the grand architecture of history. She was a woman of stark contrasts, ruthlessly pragmatic, yet deeply devoted, fiercely intelligent, yet often misunderstood, a symbol of both destruction and creation. Consider first her undeniable influence on art and architecture, a lasting echo of her Florentine spirit that continues to grace France. Can you envision the elegant lines of the Tuileries Palace? Though largely destroyed, its foundations and gardens remain a testament to her vision, shaping the very heart of Paris. Imagine the distinctive Catherine de Medici style she championed, a blend of Italian elegance and French practicality, discernible in the chateau and decorative arts of her era. Her patronage extended beyond grand buildings to the exquisite craftsmanship of jewelers, painters, and sculptors, ensuring that the French court became a beacon of Renaissance artistic innovation. Feel the weight of history in those enduring structures, the whisper of her aesthetic sensibilities woven into the very stone. Then, there is her profound impact on court culture and lifestyle. Do you taste the subtle refinements? Hear the elegant laughter that she introduced to the boisterous French court? Her arrival brought with it the sophisticated etiquette of the Italian courts, transforming dining habits, introducing new fashion sensibilities, and elevating the art of entertainment. Imagine the graceful movements of early French ballet, nurtured under her meticulous eye, blossoming from courtly spectacle into a celebrated art form that captivated Europe. These elements, seemingly small in the grand scheme of politics, subtly permeated French society, enriching its daily life and contributing to the distinct cultural identity that emerged from the Renaissance. She taught a rougher court how to truly live with grace, with artistry, with an appreciation for the beautiful dot beyond the visible. Catherine's life offers profound insights into psychology and the nature of leadership. Do you sense the depths of human resilience, the compromises forced upon a soul under immense pressure? Her pragmatic, often cynical, approach to power, born from a world of ceaseless intrigue and existential threat, became a stark lesson for future rulers. She understood that power, to be effective, often required a willingness to abandon sentiment, to make agonizing choices for the greater, or at least the desired good. Her psychological complexities, her fierce maternal love intertwined with cold calculation, her enduring grief alongside ruthless ambition continue to fascinate, offering a rich tapestry for studying the human spirit under duress. She was, in many ways, an early master of realpolitik, a testament to the idea that leadership often demands an almost unbearable moral flexibility. And so, her story flows into the very currents of literature, drama, and popular culture, ensuring her immortality in the collective consciousness. Can you picture her figure, often cloaked in enigmatic black, striding across the pages of novels, commanding the stage in plays, or gazing out from the screens of films and television series? From Alexandre Dumas's romanticized adventures to modern historical dramas, Catherine de Medici remains a captivating and often terrifying muse. She embodies the ultimate powerful woman, the tragic queen, the ruthless schemer, the devoted mother. Her life, so fraught with conflict, love, loss, and desperate action, serves as an endless wellspring for storytelling, a testament to the enduring power of historical figures who defy easy answers and provoke endless fascination. She is more than just a historical figure. She is a legend, a myth, a warning, and an inspiration, all at once. Her influence, therefore, is not merely confined to history books. It touches the very art we gaze upon, the literature we read, the psychological depths we explore in the human condition, and the popular culture that continues to reimagine her enigmatic presence. She remains a figure of enduring mystery and vigorous debate, a queen whose complex choices continue to invite contemplation, revealing the profound, sometimes terrifying, beauty of power and survival as the echoes of her extraordinary life gently fade. Perhaps you feel a quiet curiosity stirring within you, a desire to explore more such hidden stories, to journey through the quiet corridors of history. If this journey into Catherine's world has brought you peace, or perhaps sparked a new fascination, please consider subscribing to our channel, allowing these whispered histories to gently guide you into restful contemplation. And do share your own thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of Catherine's life resonated most with you? Which secret, do you think, she carried deepest in her heart? Your insights are the final soft breath that completes this story. Thank you for listening. May your dreams be filled with the quiet rustle of history.